Hildy is a bawdy, chain-smoking, 70-something former journalist who lives on the Upper West Side in an apartment that has a portal back to 1973. Time travel has rules, though, and Hildy breaks them by traveling back with healthcare aide Trista. Now both women will have to come to terms with their pasts before they lose their chance at having a future. From Ahoy Comics comes Elisa Whitney's Guilt. That's Gilt, a comic book that's Sex and the City meets the Golden Girls by way of the Twilight Zone. Call your local comic book store and ask them to order your copy of Guilt today. Welcome to Endless, a Sandman podcast from Chipperish Media. I'm story expert and smack talking demon Lonnie Diane Rich.
And I'm writer, erstwhile DC Comics editor, and garrulous toadstool Elisa Whitney. Today on Endless, we're going to be talking about Season of Mists, Epilogue, Issue 28 from the Sandman comic book series.
Season of Mists Epilogue was written by Neil Gaiman, penciled by Mike Dringenberg, inked by George Pratt, colored by Daniel Vazzo, and lettered by Todd Klein. This issue was edited by Karen Berger, assisted by Elisa Whitney, cover by Dave McKean.
I doubt he'll give me a second thought. Well, I'll be a damp old fairy with no one to talk to but simple-minded giants and garrulous toadstools. Time to wake up. In this epilogue to Season of Mists, the damned are returning to hell, as Duma and Remiel adapt to their new responsibilities in different ways. Duma opts for stoic acceptance, lying back in a surprisingly seductive pose and looking blissfully detached. Remiel, restless and miserable, is still struggling to find a silver lining to this unwanted assignment. Back in the dreaming, Morpheus is also restless as he waits for Nada to join him for dinner. As a first course, the Sandman offers a grudging apology of the "I might have acted wrongly" variety, which Nada responds to with a roundhouse slap. At first, the Dream Lord is enraged. Nada is uncowed. "What will you do to me, Dream Lord? Send me back to hell?" This brings him to his senses, to his true sense of how deeply he has wronged his ex-lover. His second apology is heartfelt, and Nada responds by kissing him. Clearly, there is still love between the two, and yet when Morpheus offers her the chance to be his queen, she counters with a different offer: abandon his post and choose a new life with her. The two exes are at the same impasse they faced 10,000 years earlier, but now they accept that they must go separate ways with equanimity. Meanwhile, Lord Susanoo Ono Mikoto, the Japanese storm god, is quietly taking his leave when Morpheus confronts him, calling out his true identity, Loki. Turns out the trickster god disguised himself and switched places with the Floating Kingdom's emissary. Pay attention now, kids, leaving Lord Susanoo to take Loki's place back in the cave with the serpent dripping poison on him. In a surprising move, Dream offers to save Loki by replacing Lord Susanoo with a dream version of Loki. In return, though, Loki would owe Morpheus a favor. While Loki accepts this bargain without a second thought, the fairy woman Nula is not so thrilled with her situation. Her brother had neglected to mention that Nula would not be returning to fairy. As a gift from Queen Titania, Nula is to remain in the dreaming. Making matters worse, Morpheus insists Nula remove her glamour, which means she goes from blonde bombshell to bedraggled waif. Nula cries at the prospect of leaving her ne'er-do-well brother, but Nada is more composed at the prospect of major life change. She even questions whether she, like the other damned souls in hell, could have simply walked away. Morpheus pledges to love her in whatsoever body she wears and attends her birth as a young Asian male in Hong Kong. On a beach in Perth, Australia, an old man sits behind the handsome young blonde man admiring the sunset. "I've had a shit of a life," the old man says, gazing out at the changing colors of the sky. "All things considered, it wasn't fair. Everyone I've ever loved is dead, and my leg hurts all the bloody time. But I think any god that can do sunsets like that, a different one every night, Struth, well, you got to respect the old bastard, haven't you?" After the old man leaves, the blonde man sits in silence for a moment, and then the devil, because of course that's who the blonde man is, or was, gives God his due. "I admit it," says Lucifer. "The sunsets are bloody marvelous." Meanwhile, one half of the current leadership in hell is discovering new purpose. From now on, Remiel informs the demons and the damned, there will be no more wanton violence. From here on in, all torture will be done in the name of redeeming sinners. But don't you understand, wails one of the tortured souls, that makes it worse. Unperturbed, Remiel is content in what he has decided to view as the best of all possible worlds. This closes the chapter in Destiny's book, but our chapter ends with a final quote from a book that G.K. Chesterton never wrote, but which exists in Lucien's Library of Dreams.
All right. Well, before we get started today, we want to let you know that Endless is going on a bit of a hiatus. We are anticipating the television series start date, hopefully to be announced soon, so we can start to make plans. But we've got to be able to plan for everything to come. That said, for Patreon supporters, Chipperish Media will be active most Saturdays with live watches where we all gather in Discord and watch a movie together, and a couple of Ask Me Anythings with Chipperish hosts. I have currently roped Joshua Unruh in for one of those, and I'm hoping to get Elisa in for one. So if you are not already a Patreon supporter, now is a great time to sign up, because everything we're doing in the next month or so will be solely for supporters. But hang in there. In June, there will be more news of things coming. And for anyone who loves comic books, you'll be happy about that news. I have a few things in the hopper working that way. But now we're going to talk about this comic book, specifically Sandman Season of Mist Epilogue. Elisa, what'd you think?
Well, ending a big Thrones and Pawns drama, it's not easy. You have to balance these big, crescendo moments with the smaller personal ones. And you have to give things enough space so that decisions, characters come to things in a way that feels organic and not just manipulated. Game of Thrones writers, I'm looking at you. This ending works. It works for me.
Yeah, I like it. There's a lot of great stuff here. I love Loki's resolution. Most of it, I have some issues with it, which I'll deal with when we talk about that a little bit later. Lucifer on the beach, just hanging out with a dude and watching the sunset is such a wonderful moment. And when he just gives it up to God, I kind of love that. And Lucifer wandering around without purpose, I think, is a really interesting, thing that can spawn some good stories. I'm hoping that we'll see more of that. I love Remiel and Duma in Hell. Remiel getting into it, developing his own narrative of what it means, that he's there. And what's funny is that there is that moment, right, where he's like, this is what it means. It's for redemption. It's to redeem sinners. It's to make you better. It's because we love you, right? And then to have the guy who's being tortured be like, that makes it worse. The power of a narrative is so absolute. And I love that Remiel is basically, we keep going back to him in Hell as he's weaving this narrative of what it means that he and Duma are in Hell. And he's giving it all of this meaning when in essence, it's the same shit, different day. It's the same torture. It's the same demons. So interesting. Absolutely love that. And seeing Remiel in the course of this, issue going dark by reaching for light in Hell, like that is such an amazingly masterful dismount. Like Simone Biles would be jealous of that dismount. This is wild, and I absolutely love it. I do think that this issue does Nada and Nuala dirty. It does Sijin dirty too, which is something that we'll talk about when we get there. But overall, though, I gotta say, like, there's so much stuff here that I genuinely love. Season of Mist has just been such a fun romp from beginning to end.
Yeah, no, it's I have no idea what I was going to say.
That's okay. You can take us right into the cover art.
Yes, and let's talk about the cover. You've said in the past that, this cover or that cover was your favorite. This one actually may be my favorite. It's a study in blues and whites. We get the figure of a cat-eyed Sandman containing a female figure, Nada, presumably, in what feels like a protective embrace. There are letters. I don't know to recognize if they're Chinese or Japanese or something else, actually. They are really, really red, and they kind of match the red of Nada's lips. And so we get this kind of bright, passionate dash of color and the cool melancholy of the blues and whites. Um, I don't know for sure. I didn't speak to Dave about this, but I asked another artist, and the effect of this cover might have been the result of a photograph or a painting treated with water and then painted with acrylic. And it looks like McKean scratched Nada's shape into the paint. So this is sort of a layering of different techniques, and there's some gold or copper leaf around. And I think it, you feel all the different ways in which this image has been formed, and it seems sort of fitting for a story in which we've had all these different high and low elements all coming together.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I think this cover is so cool and beautifully designed. The idea that he scratched Nada into the paint, I think, is so interesting. That she is kind of, curled up in this sort of safe space within Dream, which I think is kind of interesting. And, I like that she looks like she's resting. I mean, good God, she deserves some rest after what she's been through. I was really interested in the symbols. I am not going to confess completely to how much time I spent taking a picture of the cover and then cutting the symbols out in Photoshop and trying to run them through some kind of OCR. The only thing that I found is that the one symbol in the middle looks a lot like the kanji symbol for life. The other ones I could not find. It just the lines were not clear enough. They do look like either Japanese or Chinese characters, but I'm not really sure. I would presume Japanese because of the storm god, but honestly, and it is kanji. The symbol for life is kanji. So, I mean, that's the Japanese symbol. But I could not figure out the others. If there is anybody out there who knows, I am dying to know what those symbols actually mean. But I thought they were so beautiful and so cool, and I really enjoyed that.
And there's a nipple. And I didn't write this in the notes, but I remember Curtis King, the cover editor, always coming in and saying, "You guys are always sneaking in nipples and getting me in trouble."
It's Nipple Watch 1991.
It was a subtle blue nip slip.
There you go. It happens to the best of us. All right. So what else do we have to talk about with the art?
Okay, so last issue I forgot to mention. So Kelly Jones, who did most, I think, of the Season of Mists, was inked by Dick Giordano. So Dick was an incredible penciler and inker. He was also the 50-something-year-old vice president of DC at the time. So one of my first assignments as assistant editor was to say, here are the pencils. This is the due date. Can you get me this by this date? And Dick was great about it. I think the first time I did that, I was nervous. He ended up coming back and helping us out a few more times. And by the way, Dick Giordano, also just a wonderful artist in his own right, did some of I was looking this up. I hadn't realized. I think he did some of my favorite Wonder Womans from the 70s where she was in her mod mode. And anyway, that's beside the point. This issue, we've got Mike Dringenberg coming back. And he started, I'm trying to, now everything's a blur to me. But I mean, obviously he was, on Sandman for a really long time. This is the last time that he does an issue. And I don't know the whole story with that. He's inked here by George Pratt. And I know Neil deliberately echoed some of the panel arrangements from issue 9. So when we've got that Nada dinner, we also have some sort of callback to when that original issue, which Dringenberg drew, which has Dream meeting Nada for the first time. They're just wonderful touches here in the picture, in the panel where we've got Kaikul and Nada together. There's an image of two African, I believe, birds that is another callback. I don't think that was in the script. I think that was a Mike Dringenberg thing there. And it's some of my favorite panels are the mobile expressiveness of the Cluracan's face. that says so much without words, so that you don't need to have word balloons and dialogue in there. Let's see. And the other thing George Pratt, I don't know if I mentioned him. He also inked Kelly Jones's pencils in chapter 5, which was the issue before this one. And he is also just an amazing artist in his own right. I think I tried to put a link in the show notes so that people can see his art as well.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. And for anybody who just wants it, it's georgepratt.com. So you can go and check out his work there. Yeah, it's neat. You can see the slight differences in the way that people, different artists will work with this material. And it's always kind of fun to see those differences and see how all that stuff works. The colors in this one felt a little more muted, almost a little more pastel-y, which I thought was kind of neat, especially when we got to Hell being, filled with white balconies and roses. I thought it was a really interesting kind of artistic touch.
Oh, and the colors are Danny Vazzo, and Danny.
Oh, right. I'm so sorry.
No, and I thank you because you've mentioned that, I get to call him out and say, he was wonderful. So we've had a few different colorists before this, but once we're in my tenure, Danny Vazzo was just the regular colorist, and I loved working with him. He was great, and just, besides being brilliant at using color for mood and storytelling, he was just also a lot of fun to talk to on the phone. And since Garrulous is he wasn't overly talkative, but he was chatty in a really fun way.
Oh, that's very cool. Yeah, I love the way the colors were used here. And we also have that wonderful sunset scene, with Lucifer. But we do move between these very cool colors that we'll have in the Dreaming and these really kind of like warm, very sunsetty or sunrisey kind of colors, these very light pinks and oranges and yellows and stuff in Hell and of course in Australia. So it's really fun to see all of that come together. But, I'm still developing my understanding of what each particular artist does in these different contexts. So I just think it's really like beautifully done. And we also have a Candide reference here.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I feel like I was doing a number of footnotes for this issue, but it just
I love it.
Deserved it. So the Remiel caption where he talks about how things are, obviously it's towards the end, he says things are the best they could be. I'm paraphrasing here because it's the best of all possible worlds. I recognize that as a reference to Candide because, full disclosure, when I was a kid, there weren't as many channels. I was watching PBS, and Candide was a PBS televised play. I think that's how I also ended up watching I, Claudius. Anyway, so I was exposed to Voltaire's satirical play, and it's really funny because, the play itself is very, very weird. It's taking the satirical approach to everything being good because you're just Voltaire is heaping tragedy on tragedy. I remember there's an old woman who had half a butt cheek eaten by pirates, which really stuck with me, even though they didn't dramatize that.
Yeah, that will.
Anyway, but then I had to look it up, and I guess it's Leibniz, right? So Voltaire was satirizing Leibniz. I did take philosophy in college, but that was a couple of years ago now. So Leibniz was trying to reconcile the idea of an all-powerful, all-knowing, and yet benevolent God with the fact that there is a shit ton of evil in the world. So his way of reconciling it was to say we live in the best of all possible worlds, because if God could have come up with a better world, he would have, being all benevolent. And Voltaire satirized that. So in Sandman universe terms, I think it's kind of clear to me that Remiel's justification of God's decision to put him in charge of Hell and having a Hell along with Duma, it's warping Remiel.
Yeah.
And Remiel's sort of Leibnizian assertion that this is the best of all possible worlds, it kind of absolves God, but it also absolves Remiel of any moral responsibility for the actions he's taking.
Yeah, no, I think absolutely. And it is so fun kind of watching him attach himself to this almost zealous kind of attachment to his role in hell, and the sacredness of that role and the importance of that role. It's so interesting watching him do that, and as he tries to justify his own goodness, he ends up getting darker and darker and darker, and I just love that
I
twist.
love that you said zealous because, of course, that's how we get zealot. And there's that
Mm-hmm.
overtone of fanaticism that definitely
Yeah.
goes along with a heaping side of evil. Um, so, as I was thinking about this, I realized okay, so Season of Mists kind of has a triple ending. It's
Mm-hmm.
got a down ending where we have the new rulers of hell, and it's clear that even though they're perfectly, it's funny because I think of it as a down ending, even though it says happily ever after in hell, but it doesn't
Right.
seem like the new rulers are going to be an improvement, perhaps even worse than the hell that was before.
Yeah.
Is that a
Hmm.
down ending or an up ending? I think of it as a down ending, but I guess you could
I
also
think
read
it's a
it.
dark ending.
It's
I
a
think it's a really
it's a
interesting
dark,
ending,
ironic
but it's not a
ending.
happy ending. Yeah.
And then we have a more unambiguous ending. We've got the
Hmm.
Lucifer enjoying his retirement and able to step outside enough to give God his due
Hmm.
and say, this
Yeah.
this is give God credit for the ever-changing beauty of creation. And
Hmm.
then we've got the ending with Destiny, reading his book, closing the final chapter. And then we have that quote that's in the style of G.K. Chesterton. So
Hmm.
I'm going to mention, we had talked in previous episodes about how G.K. Chesterton, who was a writer, and he was, I just read that he was actually in he did some sort of cowboy duel with George Bernard Shaw in a silent film that never got released. So he was this wonderfully corpulent,
Hmm.
bon vivant. He was also very Christian. And
Hmm.
he was the model for Fiddler's Green.
Hmm.
Um, anyway, that is who he was. So we've got this quote that wasn't really a G.K. Chesterton quote, because if it's in
Hmm.
Lucien's library, then that means it's a book that was never written. And
Hmm.
so I went looking to see if G.K. Chesterton had said anything that we could look at that would be germane. And I got this quote: "If I can put one touch of rosy sunset into the life of any man or woman, I shall feel that I have worked with God."
Really interesting and nice considering Lucifer's relationship to the sunset in this issue. I like it. I like it. All right. So one of the things I've noticed is that when you talk about, like, I thought Cluracan was just Cluracan, that was his name, but it's not. He's the Cluracan. Is that correct?
Yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
the Cluracan, it's a kind of fairy like
Mm-hmm.
leprechaun. And
Mm-hmm.
I looked up in Oxford Reference to just see what they said. They've got three different spellings and possibly three different pronunciations, but I've already
Mm-hmm.
murdered some Irish and bad attempt at Australian this episode. And then it's like the Cluracan, like the plural of, how would you pronounce the plural of the Cluracane?
I don't even know. Irish spellings can be
Yeah.
I don't want to say tricksy. I want to say kind of magical.
Well,
There's a magic to Irish spellings and pronunciation that I do not have access to.
so people should definitely tell us. But anyway, so the Cluracan
Yes.
is one of
Mhm.
three kinds of solitary fairy in Ireland. The other being the leprechaun and the far darig.
Mhm.
He appears to be an Irish instance of the figure from European folklore known as the buttery spirit, folk motif F473.6.3.
Well, okay.
And this is again from Oxford. The Cluracan likes to enter a rich it's the plural, so the Cluracans as a
Mhm.
an order of fairy. They like to
Yeah.
enter rich people's wine cellars and drain the casks, but frighten away any servant who tries to join him. Although he prefers to stay indoors, he will, when venturing out, harness a sheep or shepherd dog and ride it for his amusement, leaving them panting and mud covered. So I guess if your dog ever disappears and comes back tired and covered in mud, that's a Cluracan.
That's a Cluracan. I kind of like it. And you know what? The Cluracan is a little bit of a trickster. In this issue, he takes Nuala there. She's going to be given as a gift for whatever, if Dream does what they want him to. And then here we are in this issue. And suddenly he's like, well, no, you're not coming home. Titania is giving you as a gift no matter what the outcome. So that's it. And then she has to take off her glamour in order to live in the dreaming. That's kind of a low moment. But before we get talking about all of that stuff, and as long as we're talking about tricksters, I kind of want to get into this Loki moment, right? Here he is dressed as Susanoo Onomikoto.
You pronounce that leave. So much better than I do.
I thought I did a terrible. Okay, I'm terrible at pronunciations like that, and I always feel really, really bad. So I am always open to corrections. Love it. Send me your recordings, everybody who knows how to pronounce these things properly, because I don't. But anyway, so he's trying to sneak out as this Japanese storm god, right? And of course, Dream calls him on it immediately and is like, "Hey, I know that you're Loki," and it's basically like, "I don't fucking think so," And then we go into this thing about Loki and about how he can put a dream version of Loki there, but then Loki's going to owe him a favor. And I love that. I love the politics of that. I love the fact that once again, our trickster is free to roam and cause all manner of trouble, because we need our tricksters out there kind of shaking things up. But the thing that bothered me about all of this is, like, what about Sijin? Like, I understand that she's not the one having the snake, salivate on her, release venom on her all the time, and that's that. But she is there, and I don't know anything about that history. I got Norse mythology. I've been listening to it. It's wonderful, but I haven't gotten there yet. And I don't know what set that up, but she has, as I remember, she was there with the snake holding the bowl, protecting Loki as best she could. And it's just when she transferred the bowls out that he ended up getting the poison in his eyes, which of course was unpleasant, whatever. But now he's not going back. What happens to her?
This is blowing my mind. You are absolutely right. And I just want to say that I hadn't thought of it, but of course, as lousy and dysfunctional as it is to have your whole relationship consist of holding a bowl to keep the poison or some of the poison out of the eyes of your, incredibly messed up partner who keeps, messing other people up. I guess it's even worse if, you're doing it only for a dream version, although... Now, here's the romance writer in me, okay? So the dream version of Loki does still, it's not just an illusion, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because...
I mean, isn't it?
I don't think so. He's saying a dream version of Loki. So I don't think we can assume it's like a hologram. It is a dream entity. And it might... So I guess that raises a whole other moral question. But if I were writing the romance of this, Siggy. Siggy for short. Siggy and the dream Loki would have that deeper relationship. That old Martin Guerre kind of idea where the guy who isn't your husband, he looks like him, but he's sort of different, and then he's kind of better.
And then he's better, absolutely.
They should have a romance.
Okay, but right, but he's suffering. I'm sure that Loki is suffering for a reason. But Siggy, in her job, her entire existence and purpose is to hold this bowl so that he doesn't get drooled upon. So there she is, continuing to hold that bowl, or even in this instance, when he's gone, just not. She's just left there with no purpose.
What she's been doing.
What is going on
She
with
could
her?
have gone on a biking vacation. She
that
could
would be wonderful.
Doing a spa thing.
But she has to come back and hold the bowl for him.
Maybe
my
she
concern
and the
is, I
serpent.
just want to know what happened to her. I want to know, is this a punishment for her? Is this? And I realized that I could go and probably read Norse mythology and find out, and I will. I'm getting there. But I'm fascinated by the backstory of this. Is she being punished as well? If she is, then why? Why does he get a break and she doesn't? Why does he get to not be there and she still has to hold the stupid bowl for somebody that isn't even Loki? Like, all of that, I don't know what happens. We don't address it, and I am fascinated, and I also want somebody to rescue her from this really terrible existence.
And this is what happens when you fall in love with a Loki. I think that, all the people who love the Marvel Universe version, in real life, you fall in love with, a trickster, with some troll blood. And, I think that's probably trollist of me, but...
Well, anyway, let's go ahead and keep moving. Here we have this lovely moment with Lucifer on a beach vacation. We've talked a little bit about that, but I really do love him just hanging out with some Australian dude, just sitting there and enjoying the sunset and the potential for story. I mean, I love how the ending of this story has seeded so much potential for other stories. I mean, I don't think anything's ever going to happen with Siggy. I would love to see that story. We've got Loki now. There's a dream version of him paying for whatever it is he did in the past. So the real version of him is going out there and is going to start stirring shit up. That's absolutely going to happen. And then we have Lucifer, who is, just out there in the world, just a retired runner of hell. Like, what is that experience about, like what is going to go on with him? And I think there was a TV series that tried to answer that question. So, I mean, there's
based
that.
On
and
the spin-off comic.
Based on the spin-off comic, yeah. So I'm really interested in all of that stuff and seeing all of that stuff, where all these potential stories are happening. It's leaving fertile ground fully seeded for like a million different stories to tell, which I absolutely love. But here's the thing, like I have my issues with both Nuala and Nada being done dirty in this issue. And anyway, so like Nuala is passed around like property and she is a gift. And yes, it was Titania who ordered it, but just because a woman did it doesn't mean it's not misogynistic. And Nuala, we have her always in these various states of undress. Apparently there is something about her body that if she puts any clothing on it, it just slides right the hell off. And then we leave her in this space. Like, this is the thing where I'm just like, wait a minute, why is she suffering? What did she do aside from eavesdrop and eat flowers? Like, she hasn't done anything wrong. She's in this space and she can't even wear her glamour. So she's got to look a little like, and we have her. And, as a woman with brown hair, by the way, I reject the idea that blonde equals beautiful and brown is automatically frumpy, because then her hair goes brown and she's just like sitting there, looking like, I don't know, like an ordinary girl. Like, she doesn't look that bad to me. Like,
she's more like, I think that I think there are a lot of guys who would prefer the more wafy. Her hair is kind of a little more punky. She's cute with the ears.
Yes, very punky and cute.
She's elfin instead of, bodacious.
Yeah, but it's really about what she prefers. And clearly she does not prefer her image to be that way. But it's all... I'm sitting there looking at her and I'm thinking, okay, this is terrible. And now there's a story seeded for that. And I really want to see something happen with Nuala. Is there anything? Like, I don't want too many spoilers, but like, I guess, am I going to be disappointed? Okay. Should I stop waiting for a Nuala story? I love Without
Nuala.
Spoiling, yes, exactly.
I love Nuala. We will see her. She is now part of the Dreaming staff. So we will see her again. And I do think that taking away her glamour it's kind of, yes, you should have your right to costume yourself the way you want, but I think it sends her on a journey that is not a bad journey in terms of knowing yourself. And
All right. Well, as long as we continue with her and we don't just leave her there, then I think that I'm a little bit happier with that. Nada, what happens with Nada? I gotta say, I really like that she's like, oh, you think you should apologize? I love that she gives Dream just hell for everything that he's done to her. I love that she smacks him across the face and is like, screw you, dude.
I need to
All
point
of
out you
that.
said giving him hell.
Giving him hell.
Oh,
yes.
okay.
She is giving him a little bit of hell, considering the 10,000 years of hell that she has been through. So we have all stuff. And I like when all of that happens, I am into it. I'm like, this is great. Finally, we're having Dream actually, deal with the consequence of what he's done. And then a moment later, they're kissing. Everything's fine. And she's like, well, I guess I could have just left if I wanted to, as though being in hell was her fault, her responsibility, as though she had done anything wrong to deserve to be in hell in the first place. And I guess at that point, I was like, I am just done with the Nada stuff. Like, I am so angry on her behalf. And I feel like, we end it with her making a choice out of two options that Dream gave her. And I would just rather at least it be her idea. This is what I want to do. This is what you are going to do for me. And it ends up being this thing where, I don't know, it just felt weird. And then there she is, brand new baby, won't remember any of it, so I guess that's good. But I find the Nada stuff so incredibly frustrating, that while there's stuff here that I really do appreciate, I think is very, very cool. At the same time, I'm just like, oh my God, just give her anger, allow her justified rage.
Well, so two things. I just want to jump in.
Yes.
I know that initially from the script, Neil wanted the dinner with Nada to, take most of the issue up. And just because he didn't have enough space, he had to condense that a bit.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate your perspective, because not only are you coming to this fresh and you're not me, but you're also coming to this, 30 years after I did. And I think that a lot of our attitudes have changed, and, hopefully we have progressed in all kinds of ways. That said, my reading of that line was that, let's see if I think that because Nada was so angry, justifiably so, at Morpheus for so long, that it took her forgiving him to take another look and to say, well, actually, I had some role to play in this as well. And that kind of fits in with this Sandman universe philosophy that the damned are in hell. Lucifer told us the damned are in hell because they choose to be, even if they're not aware of it as a choice. And I think that it only makes sense. Why would Nada then be the only person in hell who's there?
Because he put her there.
But
because not everybody was put there by Dream. He condemned her to hell because he had the power to do it, because she hurt his pride. Like, she didn't do anything wrong. So that's the thing that just makes me mad, is if she had lived a life where she was evil and doing terrible things and all of that stuff, and then she went to hell justifiably because of the only thing she did was try to push him away because she wanted to save her people. So she didn't do anything wrong. She didn't deserve that torment. She didn't ask for it. And the idea that she would say, well, I could have just walked away. This is a situation where we have someone who did nothing wrong. And the thing is that you're not responsible for the bad things that people do to you. They're not your fault, or they're not your fault, but they are your responsibility to heal from. And so the idea that she's taking responsibility for her healing from this point forward, I absolutely am on board with that. But the idea that she's like, oh, I guess I could have just walked away and I didn't. So it's really my fault that I spent 10,000 years in hell. That does not sit with me.
Again, I don't view it quite that way. But now that I think about it, I'm not sure exactly how someone lands in hell. We already have questioned those
Mm-hmm.
babies, those not full term babies from the Dead
Mm-hmm.
Boys. I mean, what were they doing in hell? It's like their big
Yeah.
sin was not being full term. So
Not being baptized or whatever. There's a lot of
there's
things
a
about hell that are not
but I think that,
making
for the
sense. Mm-hmm.
purposes of the storyline, we're in Dante's version of hell, but I will talk
Mm-hmm.
more about that later on. Anyway, so let me ask you. So you've raised all of these, a lot of them really
Mm-hmm.
legitimate issues about women and agency. Um, do you have any, propositions for what could help this moving ahead?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like for Nuala, if we didn't have her being passed around so much and so incredibly passive, I understand that she was offered like property. I understand that that this is a situation that happened. Titania made this gift and there are rules and she can't be rejected, all that kind of stuff. I'm also kind of interested in the beautiful woman who defines herself through her beauty, having that kind of stripped from her, I think is a really kind of interesting space. But I would also like to see her have some activity. I would like to see her, like, I would love to see her trying to get revenge on Titania. I would love to see her trying to get back to Fairy. I would love to see her with a goal that she's trying to do and then using whatever power is given to her in the dreaming to accomplish that. I think that would be great. So I would love to see her with a little agency. For Nada, again, I would like it if she made the decision. If at least at the end, like the thing is that when you love somebody, you love somebody. And the fact that she kisses him, it's a slap, slap, kiss kind of instance. I can understand that because she did love him. Like, and even though he did terrible things, like you love people, you love people. Like it just happens, you know? But I would like for it to have been her decision. She's like, I'm leaving you. I'm moving past this whole thing. I don't want to remember any of it. This is the solution that I want. You're going to make that happen for me. Rather than it being him saying, here, you have two options, pick one. That takes all of her agency away as well. For Sigyn, it would have been nice to have Loki at least ask about what happens to her. I think what I'm most offended by is that here is this woman who has been sharing your terrible, terrible fate for all of these years, holding this bowl over you. I'm sure that some of that poison dripped on her skin too. And Loki's concern for her and her well-being and what happens to her is zero. Doesn't even think about her. He's like, I'm out of here. That's it. You're going to replace me. I don't care about anything else. And I would really love to see a wild and vengeful Siggy show up in future issues. I don't think it's going to happen, but I would love to see it. And through all of this, like a particular instance, a single instance of this kind of thing where a woman is stripped of her agency in a story, like may not actually be necessarily like a really bad thing. Like I think in Nuala's circumstance, that again seeds the ground for more interesting stories coming from her later that I would love to see. We'll see how that goes. Apparently there is stuff coming. But I think that like because culturally and historically for so long, women have been side notes, have been stripped of their agency in stories, that when you see it, it's one of those things where you want to be like aware of it when it happens, so that as a woman who reads these stories, you don't end up feeling like you are being shoved aside and that your concerns are not important, that Nada's concerns are not important.
Absolutely. And it was interesting. I was listening to Fated Mates podcast and Sarah McLean was talking about, she never rereads all of her older books, but she was trying to look back at, I think it was 9 Rules for Romancing a Rake. I'm not sure. And she, she originally wrote it in 2010, and she wanted to make sure that she hadn't, used any language that she wouldn't, use today. And so I think for all of us who are writers, we might revisit our own work and think, oh, well, that, there are ways I might handle that differently. And of course, we'll get a chance to see some of that with the Netflix series.
Yeah, no, I think that, and also I think that like we need to, as readers, just be more critical. Like writers need to be more sensitive. We want to be careful about what we do. But again, like some of the things in here do not make for bad story. It's just something that you want to be aware of. But I think that as readers, because the stories that we get are so incredibly powerful in shaping how we think about ourselves, others, everything in the world, and story has so much power that we need to look at it with a critical eye and say, this may be true, this isn't necessarily true, but it's a hell of a fucking story. Like, we have a responsibility as readers of the culture to look at that, and I think that that's part of what we do here, talking about this stuff here. One of the things, though, that was fascinating about this, and that I didn't really notice until you had pointed it out to me, is that Dream shapeshifts. I mean, I noticed it when he became Kakul, and when he was also black in those scenes with Nada, but also that he was cat-like with Bast, that he was kind of reflecting whoever he was talking to back at them. And so we kind of have a dream in the eye of the beholder situation here.
Absolutely. And I think, that was in this script as a note to the penciler, to Mike Dringenberg. But we've also seen, didn't we see him becoming kind of Martian looking to the Martian Manhunter?
I didn't notice that, but now I'm fascinated by it. I have noticed some shifting, like, of course, in the Thousand Cats.
Yes.
In A Dream of a Thousand Cats, he was actually feline in that. But to have like some subtle physical characteristics of shapeshifting, where he's reflecting the person or entity that he's dealing with back at themselves, I find that really interesting. And it felt subtle. It was subtle enough that I didn't notice it.
Okay, so this has got me thinking. This is not in the script, and this is simply a Sandman cosmology question. So humans usually go around thinking that we are sort of the only enlightened beings with self-awareness on this planet, and only we have souls. And therefore, in the traditional depictions of heaven and hell, you usually just have humans, right? Or maybe all animals can be in heaven. But if animals have the same kind of agency, if the cats can have a feline Morpheus, why are there no animals in hell?
Interesting. I don't know. It's a good question. Maybe we'll see that or figure that out at some point. All right. So now it is time for Lucien's Library, where Elisa gives us some of her experience and perspective behind the scenes. Note that there may be spoilers in any given Lucien's Library segment. We do not guarantee no spoilers. So if that is a problem for you, you may want to skip ahead a little bit. But this is always so interesting. I would honestly, live with the spoilers if I was you. All right. So what do you have in Lucien's Library?
Well, first of all, back to hell. In Hyde Bender's book, the Sandman Companion, he asks Neil if this is his personal conception of hell. And Neil said, absolutely not. This is Dante's hell. In Neil's version of hell, he said, he's staring at a blank page with no original characters or ideas, which is basically Maddox's hell in the Calliope story.
So hell is for writers, right?
Hell is for writers. That's definitely, the writer's block is certainly one form of hell that I have been to.
Yeah, I can definitely empathize with that. Also, we're seeing some of the, you've got some clips from Neil's scripting here, and there's some conversation about British TV in the early 90s and porn. So I'm really interested in that. So
Neil seemed to have always had the TV on in the background. I think in a previous script, he complained that there was nothing but the same news snippet where nothing new had happened, but the newscasters kept talking about the same thing. And he wanted the TV movie. And then on page 13, panel 6, there is this wonderfully long aside. So I'm going to read out the description.
I love it.
Page 13, panel 6. Cluracan looking straight at us, for once being entirely serious. The self-mocking facade has vanished completely. Cluracan, reject Titania's gift if you will, but the queen will not be best pleased, and Nuala herself will risk her severest displeasure. Page 13, panel 7. The Sandman. The way he looks, parentheses, it's really bizarre. Late at night on TV, every now and then they show Spanish or French TV awkwardly voiceovered. Every now and again they drift over into porn, at which point after a week or two, someone hears about it, parentheses, because no one ever saw the show, it having been bought in a job lot of series, the program buyer would have been shown a relatively innocuous one, close parentheses, and the show vanishes. I just mentioned this because of a slightly surprising scene in the middle of a very tacky French costume drama, almost definitely guaranteeing it won't be back on next week, close parentheses, is, well, really ever so slightly amused by all this. He doesn't look like it bothers him very much. He's had all sorts of big problems. This one is petty by comparison. Sandman.
I am fascinated by these little, like insertions of just whatever Neil was experiencing at the time. I mean, this functions as both a script and kind of a personal journal. And I love it. It's so great, all this stuff that's coming up from the scripting. So that is adorable.
I am dying to know, what was the tacky French costume drama with some porn in it?
I know. I like it. All right, Elisa, what's your favorite page?
The page with the Sandman, Anula, and Cluracan. I mean, even before I knew about the tacky French porn, I just loved seeing Cluracan's facade drop. There's this moment where you can see he's worried about his sister. And there's also this great moment where Mike Dringenberg has Cluracan's hand on Nula's shoulder and it's breaking the panel border. And it's just a little touch, but I love it.
Yeah, no, it is really cool. For me, I have to say, Remiel watching the demons pouring back into hell, and he's on this pristine white balcony from above with these roses in full bloom. And there is something about all of that is so dark. Like Lucifer had fallen and seemed to feel that he belonged there, that this was his place. Remiel is above everything. Like he is placing himself literally above it all, watching it all happen and deciding what his role is. And I think that Remiel's whole play within this final issue is so much about the seizing and the reframing of a narrative that he doesn't like. He doesn't want to deal with the reality. So he's creating this narrative around everything that is based on him being really super good, and not being bad. And I think it's so fascinating. I think the visual of that was just absolutely beautiful. I loved it. So what's your favorite part of the narrative?
Oh gosh, I think it's Dream walking Nada into her next life and affirming that he's going to love her even when she no longer remembers him. I love the feeling of this, and I love the way the art has them sort of disappearing into a mist. I think it may be one of the times, I mean, usually wouldn't Death be handling this transition?
I guess maybe, but Dream seems to be taking it over for her. But we don't really get a sense of what Death does, or the idea of reincarnation is something that now is a textual part of the world building. So I think that that's really interesting. But and with all of the stuff that I don't like about the way Nada is kind of done dirty in this issue, I do love this ending. I love the kindness and the love that is just there despite everything else, and the fact that he is going to continue to love her, and has, now that he's acknowledged how wrong it was what he did, it feels like there's that space for him to love her, that becomes possible now, in a way that just wasn't possible before. And I think it's really, lovely. So I definitely, I can see why that's your favorite part. It was definitely a runner-up for me, although I have to say, once again, for me, my favorite part in the story is just Remiel getting into it. One day in hell, he's already corrupting the narrative, deciding that torture is a good thing. The seduction into power, I love all of that his reaching for goodness brings him darker and darker and darker and darker, and that is such a lovely little twist. It's one of my favorite things. All right, if you enjoyed this conversation, would like to join in, connect with the show on Twitter, follow @Chipperish and use the hashtag #EndlessPodcast, or send your comments or questions to endless@chipperish.com.
This episode of Endless was brought to you by the Chipperish media producers who support us on Patreon at the power producer level. These people are the reason why Endless is coming to you free and ad-free right now. So thank you to Abby, Alice, Christina, Erica, Jonathan, Kevin, Kristen, Rose, Sarah, Shelley, Stephania, and Stephanie. And this week's special message for our power producers: I am here only because of you, but perhaps it is a blessing.
To find out how you too can support Chipperish Media, visit patreon.com/Chipperish. Other ways to show your support: write a great review on Apple Podcasts, tell your friends about the show, or smell the reek of burning fat in the air, listen to the screams and the whimpers and the moans. Feel the pain.
This episode of Endless was edited by Chipperish content editor Jack Cram. Jack, we will hurt you, and we are not sorry, but we do not do it to punish you. We do it to redeem you, and because we love you. We are going on a hiatus until the television series starts, so when we come back, we'll be back with the Sandman Season 1, Episode 1. Until then, those sunsets are bloody marvelous, you old bastard. Satisfied?